Why do avoidants come back when you finally detach? This is one of the most common and confusing patterns in modern relationships. For a long time, the avoidant keeps their distance. There are no messages, no calls, and it feels like the connection has faded for good. People often spend weeks or months adjusting to the silence and learning how to move on with their lives. But then, almost as soon as real detachment sets in, the avoidant reaches out again. The timing is hard to ignore. It happens not when someone is still waiting or chasing, but when they have truly let go and shifted their focus back to themselves. This isn't just a coincidence. Across countless situations, this pattern repeats itself. The more someone detaches and stops investing energy in the avoidant, the more likely it is that the avoidant returns. Friends notice it, relationship experts talk about it, and people going through it are left searching for a reason. Why does this happen? What changes when someone finally lets go? The answer begins with understanding what detachment really means. Detachment is not about pretending to care less or playing games. It is a genuine shift in focus, where someone stops living in response to another person's actions and starts choosing their own path. When this happens, something in the relationship dynamic changes. The pressure is gone. The avoidant senses that they are no longer the center of someone else's attention. This new energy, free from expectation and pursuit, often triggers something inside the avoidant. It might be curiosity, a fear of loss, or even just the awareness of a space they once took for granted. Whatever the reason, it draws them back at the exact moment their absence finally stops mattering. The avoidant attachment style isn't just a set of behaviors, it's a way of experiencing relationships that's deeply shaped by early life experiences and unconscious patterns. For many, the roots of avoidance can be traced back to childhood environments where vulnerability was met with inconsistency or even discomfort. The message received, often without words, is that closeness is risky and emotional needs are best kept hidden. Avoidants learn, sometimes very young, to protect themselves by building distance. They become experts in self-reliance, believing that the safest way to avoid pain is to avoid too much intimacy. Relationships for them often feel like a delicate balance between wanting connection and fearing the demands that closeness might bring. It's not that they don't crave intimacy, they do, but the idea of truly letting someone in feels overwhelming, even threatening. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist and founder of analytical psychology, spent much of his life exploring the hidden forces that shape our behavior. Jung's concept of the shadow, the parts of ourselves we keep in the dark, offers powerful insight into avoidant attachment. Avoidants are often driven by fears and wounds they barely recognize. Their reactions aren't simply choices made in the present, they are echoes of unresolved pain, carried forward in ways both subtle and strong. Jung believed that the unconscious mind holds on to the things we refuse to face. For avoidants, that means deep-seated insecurities and past disappointments quietly influence how they show up in relationships. The fear of rejection, the worry of being smothered, and the urge to withdraw aren't just habits. They're protections built over years, shaped by stories that were never fully understood or healed. This is why avoidant behavior can seem so confusing to others. One moment, they might be warm and present, the next, distant and unreachable. Their actions don't always match their words, and their intentions are often clouded by inner conflict. Underneath the surface, the avoidant struggles with the need to feel safe and the equally strong desire to connect. Jung's work reminds us that these patterns are not fixed destinies. By becoming aware of what drives avoidance, both the avoidant and those close to them can start to see beyond the surface. Understanding isn't just about explaining someone's actions, it's about recognizing the old fears that guide them and finding compassion for both sides of the story. The avoidant attachment style, viewed through this lens, is less about rejection and more about self-protection. It is a shield raised against pain that was once too much to bear. Recognizing this is the first step toward breaking the cycle and creating new ways of relating, where distance doesn't always have to be the answer. Closeness, for many, is at the heart of what makes a relationship meaningful. It is the space where trust deepens, where comfort is found in another person's presence, and where real connection thrives. But for someone with an avoidant attachment style, the approach of intimacy is not a comfort. It is a warning signal. The closer someone gets, the more the avoidant feels the need to retreat. Outwardly, avoidants are often described as calm, independent, or even a bit distant. They may seem comfortable on their own, rarely reaching for extra reassurance or open displays of affection. This can give the impression that they simply prefer more space. Yet beneath that calm surface, there is a world of tension. For avoidants, distance is not just a preference, it's a shield. Emotional closeness can awaken old fears and vulnerabilities that they've learned to keep locked away. When the emotional climate of a relationship shifts, maybe after a heartfelt conversation, a moment of shared vulnerability, or even a joyful experience together, avoidants may suddenly seem to pull back. They might become less available, distracted, or even irritable, as if overwhelmed by feelings they don't know how to manage. This reaction is not necessarily a judgment about their partner or the relationship. Instead, it's an automatic response to internal pressure. The paradox is clear. Avoidants long for connection, just like anyone else, but the experience of closeness can make them feel exposed, as if the walls they've built for self-protection are starting to crack. Their instinct is to restore those boundaries by creating space. This is not about wanting less love, but about the fear that too much closeness will lead to pain or loss of control. The same relationship that promises warmth also holds the risk of old wounds being reopened. In these moments, partners may feel confused or rejected. The invitation in, followed by sudden withdrawal, can create a cycle of hope and disappointment that is difficult to understand from the outside. The avoidant, meanwhile, is caught between wanting to stay safe and wanting to be close. Understanding this push-pull rhythm changes everything. It brings compassion to both sides. The avoidant's distance is not a sign of coldness, but an attempt to manage a deep and complicated inner struggle, one that is not about their partner's worth, but about their own history with closeness and trust. The process of letting go from someone with avoidant tendencies doesn't happen with a single decision or sudden moment. For most, detachment develops gradually. It begins with a quiet realization. The waiting, the hoping, and the endless analysis are no longer bringing comfort or answers. What once felt like persistence slowly transforms into exhaustion, and the urge to keep reaching out gives way to a desire for peace. Day by day, the emotional weight starts to lift. The space that was once filled with thoughts of the avoidant, wondering if they'll return, replaying conversations, second-guessing every interaction, begins to open up. Attention naturally shifts. New routines form, friends become more present, and personal goals regain their importance. Activities that once brought joy start to feel meaningful again, and the sense of longing gradually loses its hold. This shift isn't about pretending not to care. It's about recognizing that investing more energy into someone who remains distant is no longer healthy. Detachment comes from accepting the reality of the situation and making the choice to prioritize your own well-being. The mind becomes less preoccupied with the past and more focused on what can be built in the present. There's relief in no longer feeling responsible for the avoidance responses or lack thereof. As this new perspective settles in, there's often a sense of clarity that wasn't there before. Patterns that used to be confusing start to make sense. The behavior of the avoidant, once interpreted as mixed signals or hidden meaning, is now seen as simply part of who they are, not as a reflection of your worth. Self-blame fades, replaced by understanding and even a measure of compassion for both sides. People who reach this turning point often describe a newfound sense of freedom. It's not about closing off emotions, but about creating space for healthier connections and new experiences. The world feels bigger and more open. Relationships with friends and family grow stronger. Hobbies, work, or creative pursuits become fulfilling again. The emptiness left by the avoidant is slowly filled by new forms of meaning and joy. Sometimes, this detachment can feel bittersweet. There may be moments when old memories resurface or curiosity lingers about what might have been, but these feelings don't hold the same power they once did. Instead, there's a growing trust in your ability to move forward and a quiet pride in having chosen yourself. The turning point is not marked by a dramatic event, but by these small shifts in focus and feeling. With time, the space once occupied by uncertainty is transformed into something more peaceful and hopeful. This change, though gradual, is powerful. It marks the beginning of a different chapter, one where your own growth and well-being finally take center stage. When genuine detachment settles in, the entire atmosphere between you and the avoidant changes, sometimes in ways that are hard to describe, but impossible to ignore. Up until this point, a significant amount of your energy was flowing outward. Even in the absence of communication, your mind was busy with questions, hopes, and the constant background noise of wanting things to be different. The avoidant, perhaps without ever acknowledging it out loud, could feel that attention on some level. There was a comfort, even in distance, knowing that your presence and energy remained fixed on them. The dynamic during this period is shaped by anticipation and uncertainty. You may not have been reaching out every day, but internally, you were still checking for signs, a message, a like, anything that would confirm you still mattered. This constant focus can act like a silent invitation for the avoidant to maintain their emotional distance. They sense, sometimes unconsciously, that the door is still open, and as long as that's true, the old push-pull pattern remains in place. But everything changes when you truly detach. The attention, the hope, the desire for answers, these things start to fade, replaced by a calm acceptance that you no longer need the situation to resolve in any particular way. This is not about bitterness or pretending not to care. Instead, it's the honest decision to redirect your energy back to yourself. Where once your thoughts were filled with their absence, now you find yourself drawn to your own interests, goals, and connections. The need to analyze every silence or read between every line disappears, replaced by a sense of freedom and self-respect. This shift creates a noticeable change in the energy between you and the avoidant. The invisible thread of expectation that kept you connected is finally released. The avoidant, who may have felt secure in your ongoing attention, suddenly experiences a new uncertainty. The safety of being pursued or wondered about is gone, and in its place is a quiet space that wasn't there before. This emptiness is not hostile. It simply reflects that your life is moving forward with or without their participation. Human beings are more sensitive to these energetic changes than we often realize. The avoidant might not consciously think they've moved on, but they notice the lack of signals. They may feel less certain, less reassured by your presence, and more aware of a gap they hadn't considered before. For some avoidants, this triggers curiosity. They want to know what changed. For others, it brings discomfort or even a sense of loss. The attention they once took for granted has vanished, and now, for the first time, they must confront the reality of your absence. This is often the moment when the avoidant returns. The lack of pursuit or emotional investment from your side acts as a mirror, reflecting back to them a space they used to occupy. It's as if your detachment disrupts the pattern they've come to expect. The certainty that you would always be there is replaced by a question mark, and for many avoidants, that shift is powerful enough to pull them back in, even if they don't fully understand why. When you stop centering your life around someone else, you become more attractive, not because you are trying to be, but because genuine self-respect and autonomy are compelling. The avoidant senses this change, and the balance between you is altered. Sometimes this leads to reconnection. Other times it simply marks a turning point where you are no longer caught in the same cycle. Energetic shifts are difficult to measure but easy to feel. They signal that you have reclaimed your space and are living with intention. In doing so, you change not only your own experience, but also the dynamic between you and the avoidant, creating the conditions that often lead to their unexpected return. For those on the outside, the avoidant's return can seem sudden or even calculated. But the reality is much more complex. When someone who keeps their distance begins to sense your absence, a quiet conflict is set in motion inside them. This conflict doesn't erupt overnight. It brews beneath the surface, triggered by the energetic shift that true detachment creates. Avoidants are often used to being the one who sets the pace of connection. As long as they feel in control, knowing someone is waiting or hoping, they can comfortably maintain distance. But the loss of that attention unsettles them. It leaves an unexpected emptiness that is difficult to ignore, even if it's never openly admitted. Inside, the avoidant starts to notice a void where familiar signals used to be. The lack of messages, the absence of check-ins, and the quiet where there was once a sense of being needed all add up. This change isn't always clear to them at first. It might register as restlessness, a sudden curiosity about how you are, or even flashes of nostalgia for the comfort your presence provided. Beneath these reactions is a deeper fear. When the avoidant realizes they are no longer being chased, it forces them to confront questions they've avoided. Was the connection really over? Did they misjudge your value in their life? The space that was once filled by your energy now feels like loss. Guilt can emerge. Guilt for how things ended, for the pain their distance caused, or for opportunities that slipped away. Even if they once believed that distance was necessary, seeing you move forward without them stirs up old doubts. This isn't just about missing someone out of habit. The return is often prompted by a combination of longing, regret, and an uneasy awareness that the story didn't end on their terms. Sometimes, unresolved emotions from the past resurface. The avoidant may remember moments of connection that felt good and safe, and wonder if something important was left behind. This can drive them to reach out, not necessarily because they've changed, but because the shift in energy has forced them to see the relationship and themselves from a new perspective. Yet, even as they return, the internal conflict remains. The same fears that led to distance in the first place are still there. The need for control and self-protection battles with the desire for connection. This is why their reappearance can be filled with mixed signals, one moment warm and open, the next hesitant or reserved. For the avoidant, coming back is not just about you, it's about the unresolved struggle within themselves. It's a reaction to change, a response to the silence you created by letting go. Understanding this conflict can help you see their return not as a sign of deep transformation, but as an honest reflection of what happens when someone is finally faced with the space your detachment leaves behind. Stepping back and seeing this pattern through a spiritual lens reveals meaning far beyond the cycle of distance and return. These moments aren't just random events or mistakes, they're opportunities for deeper self-understanding and growth. The recurring dynamic with avoidance is often a mirror, reflecting back what needs healing within, not only in the avoidant, but in yourself as well. On a spiritual level, every relationship carries a lesson. When faced with the push and pull of an avoidant connection, it's natural to focus on the other person's choices and behaviors. But something powerful happens when the focus shifts inward. The pattern asks for honest self-inquiry. Why did I hold on for so long? What was I hoping to fix, change, or prove? The answers to these questions often point to old wounds, unspoken fears, or unmet needs that began long before this specific relationship. There's a kind of awakening in realizing that someone else's distance isn't a verdict on your worth. Their fear of closeness is not a reflection of your value. This realization opens the door to self-compassion, freeing you from the need to chase, explain, or earn someone's love. Instead, you are invited to honor your own boundaries and desires, and to see the connection as a teacher rather than a test. Spiritually, these cycles can be seen as invitations to greater authenticity. When you choose to detach, not as a tactic, but as an act of self-respect, you demonstrate to yourself and the world that your sense of self isn't dependent on another's attention. Each time you move through this pattern, you strengthen your ability to trust your intuition and care for your own needs. The lesson behind the pattern is about more than relationships. It's about learning to return to yourself, finding clarity, peace, and a deeper sense of purpose that remains steady, regardless of who comes or goes from your life. When the avoidant reappears after a period of silence, the moment can bring a rush of emotions: surprise, hope, confusion, even a touch of doubt. It's easy to get swept up in old feelings, or imagine that their return means everything has changed. But this is the moment where your own wisdom matters most. The first step is to pause. resist the urge to respond immediately, or interpret their return as a promise of transformation. Take time to notice how you feel, not just about the avoidance message or gesture, but about your own growth since letting go. Revisit the boundaries and priorities you set during your detachment. These are the guides that will help you navigate what comes next. Consider what you truly want from this renewed contact. Is it a chance to reconnect on healthier terms, or is it an opportunity to finally close the chapter for good? There's no single right answer, only what feels honest for you now. Remember that you are not obligated to resume the old dynamic. You can choose a new approach, whether that means opening the door with clear expectations or gently reaffirming your decision to move forward. Sometimes, the avoidance return is simply a reaction to the shift in energy, not a sign of real change. Trust actions more than words. Notice whether patterns have genuinely shifted or if familiar cycles start to repeat. Give yourself permission to protect your well-being, even if that means maintaining distance or saying no. Whatever you decide, let the choice come from a place of self-respect. This is an opportunity to honor the lessons you've learned, to hold on to the growth you've achieved, and to approach the situation with clarity and compassion. The power to shape what happens next is yours, rooted in the wisdom you've gained from the journey so far. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. See you next time.